This study session, thank you. This study session for the Planning and Zoning Commission is open to the public, but is not for public comment. Public comment, a time for public comment will be available at 5:30 at the public hearing when Chair Ontiveros opens up portions of the meeting for public comment. So with that, Bob, if you could go ahead and present CUP 2110 campground in the Valley area near Woodland Ranch.
Good afternoon, commissioners. Can everyone hear me?
Hear you great.
All right, great. So this is another campground in the Woodland Ranch area. It's gotten very popular for campgrounds, as you know. This one is up at the edge of the private land, just north of Valley. And by the way, if you haven't noticed, a lot of maps are starting to show Valley as Grand Canyon Junction. So they're working on, I guess they have changed their name, at least in some formats. But this is the subject property, and basically it is these two 40-acre parcels and these 4 10-acre parcels. Now, the development actually would not be included on these 3 parcels at all, and staff was discussing earlier whether we should require them to combine all the parcels, and that's probably something we would do. Part of the reason that they don't want to put any development on these 3 parcels is as a buffer to this home down here, which is actually very good. I believe there's some more homes a little bit further to the south of here. Yeah, you can see some more housing down there. So that's actually a really good idea. What that also allows them to do is to have more density because per acreage, they can have a certain number of camp spots. So this is the property. As you can tell, there are quite a few trees, quite a bit of vegetation on there. It looks like also some drainages that go through here in various locations. This would be the access. They will be required to get an encroachment permit from ADOT off of Highway 64 here. This is an old existing development basically the ruins of an old development. Looks like there might have been a house here. There's a water tank. I'm not sure what this is, some kind of stock tank or something like that. If you've driven by here, you'll see there's some fencing along the roadway right here. I'm gonna go ahead and pull up the site plan and show you that. Let me see, make sure, actually that is not it. And this is the site plan. Again, the property goes much further in, but this shows the proposed developed area on the site plan. They include some RV spaces here. These are 4 RV spaces. There's also an office on the way in, as you can see. These little rooms with dots, these little squares, rectangulars with dots on them, those are restrooms throughout the development. Up here, they have kind of an interesting thing. They originally wanted to do something called a quirky campsite, which included tree houses and many different things. But that really isn't something that fits with our definition for a campground. So what they're going with instead, they did have a couple of these. These are Airstreams. So they want to put like 10 Airstream trailers in this section. So those, of course, are RVs, so they can do that. You can put up to 20% RVs on a campground. These areas are different kinds of tents. I'll show you some pictures in a second here. This is also tents. And then out here, this is a new thing we're starting to see, and I've actually seen some pictures online about this kind of stuff, but this is a wagon circle. So these are basically just tents. They're canvas and they're on a platform. So we look at them as being tents. That's kind of our main definition of a tent right now. And you can also look at, they talk about possible future group camping in this area. And let's see, where else was that? I believe it's over in here and then over in here. They're talking, yeah, there it is. Possible group camping. They're also talking about some tents that may go in here. we're okay with that as long as they include that in their density. Right now, I believe they said they have 84 spaces, and the RV spaces did meet that ratio as it is required to do. And I'll go ahead and show you a couple of pictures of the some of the things that they want to do. This is their rendition of the Airstream trailers. And this is their photos of the tents. This is the kind of tent they would like to use. 4-person tent, basically. It looks like just straight up canvas. So for some of those places that I talked about, they would just like to have a spot where people could just go pitch their tent, which is fine. Some people are much more simple. They don't want a big glamping tent. They just want to pitch their own tent and stay in that. Let me backtrack just a second here. This is a tour company. So this is a campground that they would bring they have people out on tours. They have right here, they're talking about 14 passenger van parking. So they would have these vans and they would bring people in from their tour of the Grand Canyon, and they would stay here. They have indicated in their citizen participation plan I was reading when they were talking to the local residents that they said over and over again they have lots of experience in campgrounds and this kind of thing. So apparently they have these in many different places, and we've seen that with some other people who have come here with campgrounds, some other developers. So they also, like I said, they had a citizen participation plan. I think this is done by CD&E engineers in town, and they had a very thorough conversation. I think their citizen participation report was 60 pages, but it only appeared that 5 or 6 people from the local area were there. They had the standard types of concerns, fire, lighting, quiet times. This one does have the advantage that it is on the highway, and it would not access any of the local roads. It just comes straight off the highway. That also keeps them from having to build up the local roads to meet the standard of the 42,000-pound vehicle. But it also, as staff discussed earlier, it may require a turn lane because they're going to have quite a bit of people coming in here, and these larger vans will be pulling off the highway. And as you know, Highway 64 is very busy going up to the canyon. They do have a landscaping and lighting plan. It wasn't super clear what kind of landscaping they intended to install, but if you look at the site and look at the aerial photo, obviously lots of trees here. So I think the trees that are here would probably serve to to be sufficient for the required landscaping. I know they did have some landscaping around their office building. They were proposing very little lighting. Their lighting was basically some lighting around the office. I think there's a pole out at the entrance so that people could see it. There's some lighting at the restrooms around the office and the other buildings, and of course lighting inside the tents. And it was all to be fully shielded. Of course, this is a great place to take advantage of dark skies, so they would not want to have a lot of lighting, because some people that come here and visit the Grand Canyon haven't been in areas like this before and have not seen stars like we have here. And with that, I'll go ahead and take any questions from the commission.
Hi, Bob. It's Sot. What's the name of this place? I'm trying to keep track of them.
This one's called they came in as Bindle Stiff Tours, and now they changed it to K&R Tours.
So just K&R Tours is our working name right now. Okay.
Yeah, K&R Campground, basically.
Okay. What is that U-shaped historic piece of dirt?
This here?
I can't see it.
Oh, I'm sorry.
On the site picture, there's some U shape. I think it's on this property.
Is it on the in the
On the
aerial, you
picture.
mean?
Yeah, on the
Oh,
area.
this?
Yeah.
I actually looked at that. I pulled it up close, and it, as far as I could tell, looks like a bunch of downed trees, a bunch of brush that somebody had taken off and just kind of piled up in a circle right there. I actually tried to see it from the highway, just using my Street View, Google Street View, and I couldn't tell
Yeah.
what it was. But that's what it looked like. I was curious, just like you are. I was like, "What is that? That is really weird." I imagine they'll do something to get rid of that.
And also, what do we think about the drainages here? It looks, I can't tell really from the map without putting the picture and the map side by side. Are we keeping things out of drainages? Are those drainages really? I mean, we're not going to get a flood zone out there. Yeah.
Yeah, it does actually show them on here, I believe.
Or does it?
Let me see.
I
I believe
think
this
that
is
dashed line right there may be labeled about.
Yeah, there it is. Thanks. I don't know if there's each side of the drainage. Yeah, flow line for USGS quadrangle map. So that's a flow line. So it would be kind of coming in there like this. I don't think I'd looked at floodplains, but I'm pretty sure I don't believe there are any floodplains out here.
I don't think so.
I don't
But
remember any
it's
floodplains.
just a thought. It looks like now that you put those two side by side and with that dotted line, it looks like they've taken that into consideration.
Yeah, and this is done, CD&E has done the engineering firm in town, civil design and engineering. They have done, this has kind of started to be things that they've done. They may be, I don't think they were at this meeting, but so they're getting used to, they're engineers for one thing, which is a good thing. They're getting used to doing these campgrounds.
Well, they are doing the one that we talked about, that we're going to talk about later tonight. And
Yeah, they are. That's correct. So they, they obviously, what we do now, I think you probably heard this, is we send this to engineering early, to our engineering division early, and they just basically, they don't require a lot of studies or any kind of stamp plans at this point. Of course, it's a little bit too expensive for something that hasn't been approved, but they do look at it and say their plan looks feasible. Their tentative plan looks feasible.
It's their preliminary grading and drainage plan. Yes.
Right. So it is a feasible plan at this point.
Bob, I've got a question for you.
Okay, Commissioner Ruggles, of course. Yes.
Yeah, I believe I've been out to this property some time back for a portion of it for a temporary permit. But my question is this, do they have electrical power to the any portion of that property at this point?
I'm pretty sure they do, but I did not read that, but I think there should be power lines that through here. This was the developed piece of property. There are other developments around here. I don't see any plans for solar or wind or anything. So yeah, I'm pretty sure they have electrical power.
Okay, I asked very simply because if it's just simply solar versus APS power, may have some bearing on their lighting permit and what they're required to do. So that's why I asked. Thank you.
Okay, yeah. I don't, it looks like they're really going light on the lighting, no pun intended. But yeah, like bathrooms and buildings, because I mean, if you can imagine people from Japan, China, Europe that are here, and they've never seen the stars in the southwest like this. It'd be quite a sight for them.
Yeah, that seems to be fairly typical of these recent developments like this we've looked at. So I'm not terribly concerned that they want to light it up like Tokyo at night. So
yeah, right.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions from the commission? Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Bob. So Chair Ontiveros, that is your only public hearing item for next week, excuse me, next month. And we'd like to move on in your agenda to the department update. The first item on our department update, we'd like you to join us in welcoming Kelly Bingham to our staff. And Kelly's with us, so if Kelly can turn her camera on. So if all the commissioners could please let Kelly know how being a new planner at Coconino County Community Development Planning and Zoning is a great place to be. Looks like Kelly's trying to get her camera up.
Yeah, can you hear me?
I hear you fine, not seeing anything yet.
Huh. I tested it just a minute ago.
While that's trying to open up, just a quick introduction, and I'll let you introduce yourself. We're really excited to get Kelly onto our staff. She's a relatively recent grad from ASU with a master's in planning, and she's already getting integrated. Kind of a weird time to be starting a new job with a high percentage of our office working remotely, but she's been coming in the office. We've been getting to know her, and she's taken on some tasks, working quite a bit with Bob right now, focusing on preparing our pre-application meetings. So Kelly, anything else you'd like to let the commissioners know about yourself and your interest in planning?
Yeah, first of all, thank you. I'm really excited to work with all of you. I'm excited to be here. Everyone has been so welcoming and amazing so far. I'm really enjoying working for the county and living in Flagstaff. So thank you all. I'm really excited to be here.
Kelly, this is Chair Ontiveros, and I would just like to welcome you to the team. And I think that I can speak on behalf of the entire commission that we are looking forward to working with you as well.
Thank you, Chair Ontiveros.
All right.
Kelly, welcome. This is Sot Best. I don't know if everybody's going to take a shot here, but we are working on workforce housing. So just so you know, maybe you can jump into that and end up with a house.
Okay, here's my video. Hello, everyone.
There you are.
We can see you now, Kelly. Welcome.
Okay, thank you, Kelly. Thanks for getting your camera up. Any other comments from any commissioners, and we can move on with our agenda?
I just was wondering if there's any idea of when we might be doing these live and in person again.
Wow. Well, Commissioner Williams, we do have an item on our agenda towards the end of our department update where we discuss that. As of right now, the county has not changed its phase of COVID response. We anticipate that will happen sometime soon, probably sometime within the next month, well, being that today's the last day of this month. We anticipate sometime within the next month that our lobbies will open back up. I can tell you I had a meeting yesterday downtown at the admin building in that wonderful room that we all used to spend some wonderful evenings with myself, the clerk of the board, and IT, and the public information folks, Eric Peterson. And what we were discussing in that meeting in those chambers was how we are now in the process of upgrading those chambers to where we could hold hybrid meetings. So what is anticipated, as we've discussed before, is that as we transition, we would anticipate the transition would be holding in-person meetings. However, if any staff, commissioner, or public members, applicant or public members wanted to do the meeting remotely via Zoom, they would be in the same meeting, participating in the same meeting. So that's what we're seeing as the next transition. How soon we would see that happen, I'm not sure. We're still taking the board and obviously the county's health department's direction on public meetings. I would not anticipate that next month's meeting will be in person. It would not surprise me if potentially May or into the summer could be one of those hybrid meetings. Any questions on that? Thanks for asking, Commissioner Williams. So Chair Ontiveros, if there's no other questions on that, we'll jump into our department update item number 2, the DPTF, Donny Park Timberline Fernwood Area Plan update. And Melissa is actually going to cover all of items 2, 3, 4, and 5 on your agenda here. So we'll let Melissa come on, and as she's going to share her screen, we've got a little extra time in your study session today. So she does have some slides prepared to talk through the renewable energy ordinance. So go ahead, Melissa.
Thank you. And I thought we could just run through actually a very similar presentation that we'll be giving the Board of Supervisors next week on these 3 items: the regional plan update, the area plan update, and then the renewable energy ordinance. So I'll probably move pretty quickly through the regional plan and area plan updates, and we'll spend most of the time that we have on the RIO to get some details and then get some feedback from you all on some of the major points that we're working on. So last night, the city council actually heard a presentation on the regional plan update from planning staff, and they are gearing up and getting ready to launch right into the project. So as you all know, the regional plan 2030, it's a goal and policy document that is shared by the city and county, created jointly and adopted by the county in 2013, adopted by the city in 2014 through different mechanisms. Both the city and county, city council and board of supervisors adopted them, but the city had to then send their plan out to be voter ratified, and it was in 2014. So there are differences there. And again, here is the boundary. So the boundary of the regional plan does go out to the FMPO boundary, and we talked about this a little bit last time in terms of the population densities. But you can see, 5 of our area plans, and actually a bit of the parks area plan, you can see this upper northwest corner, are within the regional plan boundaries. So we've got Donny Park, Timberline, Fernwood, Mountain Air, Kachina Village, Fort Valley, 180 Corridor, Belmont, and then a little bit of the parks area plan. And as an amendment to the county comprehensive plan, we review the regional plan with all projects involving a conditional use permit, a subdivision, or a rezoning. So we look at the goals and policies equally weighted as we would as an area plan or a comprehensive plan section. And so again, the update to the regional plan is guided by ASRS, which requires an update every 10 years. And, we really do use it as a common tool and framework for coordinated planning efforts between the city and the county. And we, look at aligning our transportation planning, land use planning, recreation, trails, public safety, natural environment, and other topics. So, it is a very useful document in the sense of coordinated planning efforts. So as I mentioned, the city council heard this item last night. They had a lot of comments and focused quite a bit on the public participation plan that has been drafted to kind of give an outline of how that would work. They have provided some basic funding initially to get some of the data analysis off the ground. And from a county perspective, we will provide city staff with support and assistance to facilitate the process, obviously to promote and participate in public outreach and public participation planning. We will also be working a lot behind the scenes in data collection and analysis, and then obviously throughout the entire process, updating and looking at the goals and policies. So from a county resource side of things, we will be requesting funding at least to do mailing and public notices to the county covered area of the FMPO boundary, And then potentially if there is any possibility of requesting some funding to contribute to the data analysis, the scenario planning, and the document preparation, that could be something that we ask for in future fiscal years. And this is just a draft of the process, which shows it taking about 4 years, with the 4th year being plan adoption by the city council, city ballot initiative, and then county adoption. So we're in the phase 1 phase right now, where we're basically getting organized. And then there would be these different phases of what might be of interest. Is at the bottom of this chart for phase 1 is this idea of creating art and excitement. And there has been some money allocated by the Flagstaff Beautification and Arts Council to provide some, or to contract with some artists to do things like story mapping and graphic note taking, to really kind of bring in a different kind of process to get creative and make it not such a dry planning exercise. So that's the just a brief overview of the process. And as I mentioned, right now we're getting data organized. We're starting to research what emerging issues and trends are, such as equity and inclusion, figuring out what might be included in the new regional plan to address climate change. As you know, the city of Flagstaff has adopted a climate change action plan. The county, we don't have a similar document, so there might be some interesting discussions on how that works between the two organizations, and whether or not we can apply that concept to the entire regional plan boundary. We're working, as I said, presenting to the City Council and Board of Supervisors to get some direction on the budget, the P3 process, which is public participation planning process, and the schedule. And the P3 process will be very different from the last regional plan process. We'll roll that out as we get more endorsement on the actual process for that, but it will be different, and more updates will follow. So that's just a real brief overview on the region plan update. Are there any questions or comments? Okay. So we'll go on then to the Donny Park Timberline Fernwood Area Plan update. And as you know, this is a planning area. It is one of our larger planning areas within the county limits. And just some images of the different places in Donny Park. And, the County Board of Supervisors in 2019 selected this as the next area plan to be updated out of the 9 county area plans. The current plan was adopted 20 years ago in 2001. And as you might anticipate, there's been a lot of building activity. So that was one of the reasons why the board elected to have this plan updated as the next priority. And at the time when we had supervisors Archuleta and Parks on the board, they invited community members to serve on the committee. Those same committee members are still working today on the plan. We began in January of 2020, and as you have heard throughout the process, they're currently in the process of updating the vision, goals, and policies. And we are hoping to launch the first open house in late May, and looking for public hearings hopefully in the fall of this year. And so they are working on a draft vision that has 4 components: for natural resources, open space, environment, community character and values, land use, growth and development, and transportation. So they're kind of following the model that our comprehensive plan sets out for having different components for this type of vision. And this is just, again, the planning process and the schedule. So, one thing that has come out in the past few days is there's a self-guided driving tour that's available for the community. So we're hoping to get some participation from community members in that. There's also another survey available with that driving tour. So it's just a way, another activity to get people out to really understand the boundaries and the large planning area and the diversity of Donny Park, Timberline, Fernwood. So with that, are there any questions on the area plan process update?
Hey, Melissa, this is John Ruggles. I have one comment to make on this. I want to thank you, Zach and Bob, for the input on the land use and planning portion of it. It went remarkably smoothly, even though you folks had to listen to my comments as a committee member. But I think that was a good example of really, I think, how it should work. So I want to thank you very much.
Thanks, Commissioner Ruggles, and we'll that was a lot of work to update, and we'll bring that back to the commission hopefully pretty soon to see the results that are coming out of the process. Any other questions on Donny Park?
Yeah, Melissa, this is Saad. What time is the supervisors meeting next? Is it Tuesday?
It's on the 6th. Yes,
Wednesday?
I believe it starts at 1:15. Jess, do you know more specifically?
Yep, just confirmed this morning at the clerk's agenda review meeting that it will be at 1:15.
Okay.
Could you send out the time and how we might log into that? I'd kind of like to listen to that.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, we can do that, son.
Appreciate it.
And this is a preview. You'll see this very similar presentation. So, but then you'll hear their comments on it. Okay, so next and the last update that we'll talk about tonight is the RIO, the Renewable Energy Ordinance, and the draft and the process. And I know you all have heard this, but we have, I think, maybe a little bit longer than we normally do to get into some of the details and get your feedback on a couple of items. So if you all remember, this is a 2015 comprehensive plan direction. There's an action item that specifically directed staff to write a utility scale energy ordinance, and we have focused on renewable energy for this, mainly due to the project applications that we've seen for large scale wind turbine projects, and also now solar projects. Obviously, we know there's a lot of energy generation potential in our county for wind and solar. There's just overall an increased demand for renewable energy. The project, particularly the biomass aspect of it, can support forest restoration and public safety. And the APS, Arizona Public Service, has launched their decarbonization plan, so that could also drive additional projects in the county. And then we know with the Navajo Generation Station closure, that has freed up additional energy capacity on the transmission lines. So there are a lot of motivations for preparing this ordinance. We're getting guidance directly out of our comprehensive plan. Both the implementation plan, the energy element, and Appendix D were very thoroughly organized and developed sections of the comprehensive plan that really lay out for us the purpose for doing the update, as well as some guidance for standards. We've organized a large advisory group that is helping us as staff draft the ordinance and think about the different particular aspects from both developers' perspective, from residents' perspective, and also from consultant perspective. So we've had a lot of input on that, as well as we've got a few commissioners on these committees. So we're really getting hopefully a lot of early input to what this ordinance will contain. The joint land use study also gave some direction in terms of updating, or rather putting together this plan, and we have been fortunate to connect with the Navy and with the Flagstaff Naval Observatory in particular to get their input directly into the process. And then we've looked at across the country different ordinances and looking at best practices for developing these types of codes. So just quickly on the process, we completed a first draft in May of 2020, which has changed substantially. Thank you to our technical advisory group and a community advisory group. So our technical advisory group first gathered in June of last summer, and then our community advisory group in September. In reality, it's all merged now. So we get a lot of people coming to our virtual meetings, and it's been a very rewarding and I think pretty robust process. For the planning and zoning, this is really the first time we've been able to spend more than just a few minutes talking about it tonight with you, and then with the board again on April 6th, they'll get an update, and really their first update as to where we are with this process. And then we will have public open houses and public hearings as when we move forward with the final draft. The map on the left side of your screen, I am not going to spend a lot of time on this, but we have started to map where these projects are within the county. And so we know what projects are on the ground, we know what projects are approved, we know what projects are pending. So we are trying to track these and map them. So that is what that map is displaying. So then just to start getting into some of the details, we are right now proposing to amend 3 chapters in the zoning ordinance. Chapter 3, special uses and conditions. This will be a conditional use permit specifically for utility scale renewable energy systems. And those will basically fall under our utility facility definition and include standards for solar facilities, wind facilities, and biomass. We're also proposing to amend Chapter 5 for waivers and add to that additional types of waivers for audible noise, underground placement of collection lines, for shadow flicker, and there's also and the ability to waive setbacks, as you know. But I added that here because the setback discussion is ongoing at this time, and it's actually one of the points that we would like to get your feedback on. We will also be proposing to amend Chapter 6 definition with new terms and concepts. One of those that's really important to developers is this idea of a participating and a non-participating property owner. And briefly what that is pretty much what it sounds like, where an energy developer will work with adjacent property owners who may or may not actually have a portion of the facility on their site, but they are some way participating in that they may be compensated by the developer in some way to be part of that project area. So this then will lead into the idea of how the setbacks apply. So you'll see that more in a bit in terms of how this actually works. The idea of a shadow flicker is pretty much like it sounds. It's the effect of the turbines when the turbines are turning, and the kind of strobe effect that occurs when the sun is shining through the blades. So shadow flicker is a phenomenon that can affect people. So there's actually a definition for it, and there are some mitigation strategies for how that impacts people. And then the idea of a definition for visual resource is something that we have been really trying to get a handle on, and we'll look into that pretty much in a lot of detail with you tonight, and then hopefully later on, because right now the county we reference visual resources in our comprehensive plan, and we actually have some definitions, but we don't have an actual definition for a visual resource, and we don't have a map of county designated visual resources. But it's an important concept to these projects because, as you know, visual resources can be dramatically impacted by particularly new turbines that all of a sudden, pretty significantly change landscapes. So this is something that we want some time to discuss with you. Looking a little bit more carefully at the outline of Chapter 3, we did model it to some degree after the wireless telecommunications ordinance, in that there are preferred and disfavored location criteria. And we also have drafted into this current draft that we would, at the pre-application stage, request to see preliminary site investigations for critical evaluations on wildlife, vegetation, scenic, and cultural resources. So these would be initial desktop studies that a developer or their consultant can put together pretty easily, so that when they come in for a pre-application, they are letting the county know that these are on the site or they're not on the site, to help us really determine, how these things will be cited and what impacts we might expect. And then once an application has been submitted and we actually are working with the application, then there are performance standards that they would design the site to, and the performance standards address in particular vegetation and noise, and we'll talk about that in a bit, and then visual impacts and setbacks. So application requirements, there are some pretty specific application requirements that are added to Chapter 3 that are in addition to what's required for a normal conditional use permit in Chapter 5. And those then would again address studies such as wildlife, vegetation, and scenic. And then in addition, public safety and decommissioning plans. So there are some additional application requirements for these particular types of facilities that are more than just what would be required under a normal CUP. And I would say that again, part of the process that we did to understand how to create this ordinance is to look at Perrin Wind Farm and the past conditional use permits and use those somewhat of a model as to what this ordinance should include. So we did have some, as you know, experience with those past projects that were extremely helpful in understanding what the county would want to see moving into the future with these. So here are some of the details on the favored and disfavored criteria. And these are obviously still somewhat changing, but I think that in general, the idea of a favored facility would not be visible from a visual resource, that they would be near an existing substation or transmission line, that they would create minimal land disturbance or be on a site with previous land disturbance, that a site would retain traditional land uses and allow for multiple land uses, that and actually I think that the water conservation methods is pretty much a given, but that we would favor a site that uses water conservation. And then for biomass, there are some specific favor criteria that potentially could be a reuse of a site, that it would be near a major highway or transportation line, and that preferred facilities that use what's called local feedstock. So that would be our local forest products, basically. And then disfavor criteria would be a site that conflicts with special status species and their habitat, that would create impacts to archaeological, cultural, historic resources, a site that would require significant site disturbance, or a site that impairs military operations. And then again, getting to some more specific impacts, wind sites that are within a mile of existing non-participating residential properties. And this has been something that's been very important to some of the residential landowners who have been participating on our advisory group. And then for biomass, this biomass facilities within 7 miles of observatories as a disfavor site, that tracks with our lighting ordinance. So, there are some concerns with biomass facilities that the heat signatures could potentially impact the observatory's missions. So thinking a little bit more about some of the specific performance standards, the idea of audible noise is one that has been discussed in a lot of conditional use permit projects, and we took that idea and wrapped it into this portion of the code, because the turbines, when they are turning, they do create noise, and that's pretty well understood impact from turbines. And so we have used, and we did research that the 50 decibels, audible decibels, is a fairly common standard. So the operational noise impact shall not exceed either the 50 dBA, or measured pre-construction background noise plus 5 dBA, whichever is less. So there is some basis for using that measurement, and then we would require that a noise analysis prepared by an expert come in with the application to demonstrate that that limit would not be exceeded. And then we would want some compliance testing. And then, there would be, again, that waiverable aspect to this, that if there was a demonstrated and situation where the noise impacts would be could potentially be waived, then that is something the commission could potentially do as long as it met the findings. So thinking more about the visual resource impacts, right now the way the draft is written is that for any project, there would be a requirement to have a visual resource analysis submitted for any visual resource within 10 miles of a project site. That is something, though, that staff could, at pre-application, modify and require a greater distance if there were other visual resources that were identified nearby or further out. And we have looked at the visual simulations that have been submitted with all of our projects that we have approved so far, with both Parent and then also Chevelon Butte. And 10 miles does seem to be a pretty standard distance, after which the impacts do not appear to be very significant. In other words, the eye cannot see those after 10 miles. And so the visual impact analysis is now written into, would now be written into the code as being required with the application. And there are some performance standards that are being suggested that could apply to those, such as looking for some undergrounding of collection lines. There are some caveats to that in terms of connecting to the main transmission line, where those cannot be obviously undergrounded. They have to rise up and connect to the main transmission line. Siting and design, such as color, and then some screening where possible, to use screening to mitigate impacts to neighboring properties. So here's a definition, and I know that we are actually getting close on time here, so I won't spend too long, but this is the definition that we are hoping to get some feedback from you all on, because the visual resource is important to the committee that we're working with, and it will also be very important to developers who are looking to use this ordinance in order to decide how they're going to site their project. So again, without having an actual visual resource map, the alternative was to come up with a definition that could be used to define what is a visual resource. So currently it's drafted as, it's a physical feature that defines the visual and aesthetic character of an area and can include natural features, scenic vistas and viewsheds, or human-made structures on or in a landscape. Resource designations such as a scenic byway, scenic corridor, scenic road, historic road, gateway, community historic, or other trails. National county parks and monuments, ridgelines, observatories and telescopes, and road and crater are examples of visual resources, or as identified during the pre-application process. So I know that this is a lot, but if there's any comments or thoughts on this idea of a visual resource definition, we would appreciate that from you. Or I can continue on and then we're almost finished.
Yeah, Melissa, why don't you continue on now? It's interesting that you brought this up, because on one of the first slides that you identified where you used the words visual resource, I was wondering what the definition was, and now here we've come to it. So this is interesting to me. It's 5:20.
I know.
We've only got 10 minutes left.
Right.
We might have to circle back to this at another point in time.
Okay,
I
thank
think
you.
it is important. I do agree with you on that.
Okay, thank you. And I will finish this. And then this is the last detailed slide that I have, just to let you know that we are still working on the wind turbine setbacks and what those should look like. Currently, they've been proposed to be the greater of the tower height times 3, or a half a mile from the property line of any residential or open space district. So from any residential or open space zoning district, what we're proposing is that a turbine be a half a mile or 3 times the tower height. Most of the projects that we have approved so far would all then, using this standard, would be a half a mile from the property line. We put in the tower height times 3 to anticipate some potential large tower that we haven't even seen yet. So, and then the standard as currently proposed is a quarter mile from other zoning districts, from state land and public land not zoned. There's an alternative suggestion coming out of our working group to essentially change that to a minimum of a 1 mile setback. And that came out of this long discussion, very interesting discussion about view angle, which I won't get into right now. But the 1 mile setback is the standard that was used with the parent wind farm approval. So this is something that we're still working on in addition to the visual resource concept. And these are pretty much 2 of the major concepts that we are trying to get our hands around. So with that, I think I'll stop and just take any questions or comments. We could spend much more than 20 minutes on this, as you can tell.
This is Chair Ontiveros. What I'm wondering is I agree. This is a big topic to have in a study session, and I'm wondering if there is any planning on staff's part to maybe have something a little bit more in depth, so we don't feel rushed and we can really kind of chew on some of this stuff, because there's a lot in here.
We would certainly appreciate having more of your time to jump into that on a dedicated dedicated work session. So I will turn that question back to Jess to see. We haven't talked about a specific date or how that might look.
Sure. Yeah, I think maybe following the April 6th work session with the Board of Supervisors, Chair Ontiveros, maybe we could look at a special time that we hold a separate Planning and Zoning Commission study session just on this topic.
I personally think that would be a good idea. So we don't feel rushed on some of this stuff.
Okay. All right. Well, maybe what we could shoot for is at your hearing next month, pick a discuss and then send out a doodle poll on when would be a good date and time for that.
Okay. Yeah. Why don't we move forward in that direction and just see kind of where that leads? But I think it's a good starting point, Mr. McNeely.
Sure. Okay. Well, Chair Ontiveros, you got 6 minutes left in your study session. Were there any other questions of Melissa?
Melissa, I just wanted to, I'm pretty sure that 4 degrees is 14 times the height, not 6 degrees.
Thank you.
I
think you're right. I did not change that. You're right.
Okay. And also just to the group, Commissioner Ruggles and myself are on this committee. One of the issues is sacred views, as well as the views that we've been talking about, views that are sacred to tribal entities. And I know that Melissa has reached out to those entities, but that's another whole question that needs to be resolved, and whether it gets wrapped into visible resources or is its own entity, and how that works out is also an important consideration. And I would just like to say that if you read today's paper, Babbitt Ranches and Nextera had an article on probably the next one we're going to see, which is east of Valley on Babbitt Ranches. So they're coming at us, and that one has both wind and solar, which to me is very exciting. because there's a trade-off there. Solar doesn't stick up in the sky, but it does cover a lot of landscape. So how do we balance those installations? Thanks.
Thank you, and we appreciate all the hard work everyone has given to the project. We are actually quite impressed with the level of interest that we've gotten from our advisory group. So thank you. I'll stop to share now, Jess.
Thanks, Melissa. So, Chair Ontiveros, just to wrap up your study session, we've already discussed item number 6 when Commissioner Williams asked about when would be potentially meeting in person again. So we can certainly revisit that again next month, and we're anticipating that here into the spring or summer, those opportunities will arise as the county moves into their next phases. The other item we wanted to let you know about, the Board of Supervisors item on your agenda. On March 9th, the board approved zone changes. They approved the Marble Canyon zone change to RC Resort Commercial. They approved that small Kachina Village zone change. It was just kind of a cleanup zone change. And they approved the Lockett Ranches zone change. On March 10th, the board heard the utility facility standpipe CUP in Pittman Valley. They denied that request. And if anybody has questions about that, I can certainly answer questions possibly at another time. We are anticipating on April 13th, the board will hear what's labeled as the Windmill Ranch RC zone change. That would be the one at Newman Park. And on April 14th, the board will hear the Kachina Highlands zone change. That would be the zone change that's modifying previous approvals for some RS zoning to PC planned community zoning. So any questions on Board of Supervisors hearings and schedule?
Yeah, Jess, just very quickly, I'll hold off my question for another time. And I just want you to be aware of the fact that the question I have for you on the wagon wheel standpipe is not meant to be pointed or anything else. It's just a matter of a little guidance that I think I could use if something like this comes up again. So it can wait, that's for sure.
Sure, absolutely. So with that, Chair Ontiveros, that would wrap up your agenda for study session. Any questions? We got a couple minutes left.
I don't have any, Mr. McNeely, and I'm not seeing any of the other commissioners. I'm going to piggyback on Commissioner Ruggles' comments about a future question that he feels might be helpful to him should we, have a like scenario on a case. And if it could help the entire commission, I think it would be relevant and important to share that with us.
I'm going to agree with that assessment, and I think it would be valuable for the rest of the commission to hear the question I have and the answer. So we can do that at another time. No problem, because we're down to just about 5:30 right now.
Is that something that we can do right after the public hearing tonight?
So, Chair Ontiveros and Commissioner Burton, your agenda for this evening on your public hearing agenda just closes with a call to the public. If you would like, what we could put on your agenda next month, because you only have one public hearing case again next month, is we could put at the end of your agenda reopening study session for discussion of items.
That sounds good to me.
Okay.
Yeah, Mr. McNeely, why don't we do that?
Sure.
Yeah, that works for me too. Thank you.
Okay, absolutely. So,
Okay.
Chair Ontiveros, that wraps up your study session agenda.
Okay, and I am showing that it's 5:30, so why don't we go ahead and start the meeting, and I will start with the meeting rules and procedures. Welcome to the March 31st, 2021 meeting of the Coconino County Planning and Zoning Commission. Cases will be heard in the order they appear on the agenda. Following the staff presentation, the applicant and/or the applicant's representative may address the commission. As an applicant, if you agree with the staff report and have no additional information, please feel free to keep your comments brief. Any relevant comments are welcome. Following the applicant's presentation, I will make a call to the public. If you wish to address this case, please state your name and address. We ask that your comments be limited to 3 minutes or less. Comments must be relevant to the case. Please address all comments to the commission. No matter how strongly you may feel about the case, all comments must be polite and courteous. After all interested public have spoken, the public comment portion will be closed. Discussion will then take place amongst commissioners. No additional public comments may be made unless requested by a commissioner. Decisions of this commission regarding any zone change or preliminary subdivision plat approval are referred to the Board of Supervisors as a recommendation. All other case decisions are binding unless appealed to the Board of Supervisors. If you disagree with the commission's decision, you have 15 days to appeal. Please contact staff at the Community Development Office for appeal procedures. Due to the virtual nature of this meeting, I will be doing a roll call vote of the commissioners to ensure accuracy for the record. Please mute your speakers and turn off your camera. And thank you for joining us this evening and actively participating in our county planning. The first item on the agenda tonight is the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. McNeely, if you would please lead us in that.
Absolutely. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Chair Ontiveros.
Okay, thank you. The second item on the agenda is the approval of the February 24th, 2021 minutes. So I will take a motion and a second if there are no corrections that need to be made.
I make a motion for the approval of the minutes.
I will second that.
Okay, I've got a motion by Commissioner Walters and a second by Commissioner Ruggles for the approval of the February 24th, 2021 minutes. All of those in favor, please say aye. Commissioner Ruggles?
Aye.
Commissioner Burton?
Aye.
Commissioner Best?
Aye.
Commissioner Williams?
Aye.
Commissioner Walters?
Aye.
Commissioner Clifford?
Aye.
And this is Chair Ontiveros, and I abstain. The next item on the agenda is public hearings, and we have one tonight, and that is case number CUP 21-002.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is Zach Schwartz with planning staff. And here is case number CUP 21002. The owner and applicant of the subject property is Nomad Ventures LLC out of Beverly Hills. The applicant's representative is Ian Braun of CD&E from here in Flagstaff. The existing zoning is G, that's general with a 10-acre minimum. It's typically a single-family residential and agricultural zone. The subject property size is 10 acres, and this use that's proposed is a campground. So here on your screen, I have a vicinity map. You'll see the subject property is up here. Down here, we have the junction of Highway 64 and Highway 180. That's sort of the heart of the valley area. So we're quite a bit north of that. Everything you see in this sort of whitish overlay is also in that G zone. And we have some other zones down here closer to that junction. Here's an aerial photo of the subject property. So you'll see it's fairly sparse, doesn't have much vegetation on it. You'll also see that almost 360 degrees, we have a number of home sites adjacent to the property, and they would be visible from the property. I have some photos, and these were in the staff report. So this is a photo from the subject property looking to a neighboring residential property to the west. And this is a photo from the subject property looking at a neighboring residential property to the north. For the proposed development, the applicant is requesting a campground with 20 units. So 18 of those are glamping tents in different sizes as described in the staff report. 2 of the units are glass pyramid, what the zoning ordinance would describe or define as cabins. And so these cabins are, the glamping tents are canvas, of course. And when we get into something that's more hard-sided, that's something where we would call it a cabin that's required to meet the zoning ordinance for full building code. I think I get into that maybe a little bit later, but just briefly, the purpose behind that is it is primarily a residential zone, the general zone. And so if the campground use were to be abandoned, it's quite easy to take out the tents, but we want to make sure that permanent structures that are left there are able to meet the standards for single family residential, which allow 1 main home and 1 accessory dwelling unit. So they are proposing the 2 cabins that are these glass pyramids. The glass pyramids are opaque with a film that's opaque, but that can be turned off for full transparency in 15-minute intervals. I have an example, I think, on a later slide, maybe the next slide. But I think the purpose of that is that the applicant wants the customers to be able to look up at the stars at night inside of the pyramids. There is also a common area with communal restrooms and showers, and a food truck would be located near that area, compacted aggregate driveways and parking areas, on-site septic systems. They would use solar for electricity, and there would be hauled water for the site. So here I have the applicant's proposed site plan, and the access comes from Alta Via Road, and then up kind of off the screen is Woodlands Ranch Road, which goes to Highway 64. But you'll see that they're showing the easement coming into the property from the east. And then you'll see it first comes into this community area with some communal area with some parking. You'll see there's some landscaping on the property, sort of in the north portion here, and also in the northeast portion of the property. These, I believe, are the community restrooms. And then we have some of the tent sites here where they come out to a concrete pad, and with each of these units in this area have a separate restroom. And here are septics that serve those. Down here, this is where the glass pyramids would be. So a similar configuration with the glass pyramids. And then you've got the concrete pad with the restroom areas. And these are tents that wouldn't have a restroom, but they would use this communal restroom here. I have some elevations here. So most of the tents would be your typical glamping tents here. And then we have somewhat, these are renderings of what the glass pyramids would be. So you can see it looks almost like a lounge area here with some restrooms over outside of the pyramid. And these weren't in your staff report, the lower pictures here. These I just got from the applicant a day or 2 ago, but this is showing when the pyramids are fully transparent, but most of the time they would be this opaque color with the film. I wanted to go through briefly here, and this is all in the staff report, some of the base requirements that are always required for campgrounds in the general zone. So one is that there's a minimum of 10 acres. So we do have that here. We do have a maximum density of 20, basically 2 units per acre. So for this, 20 units, and that's what's requested, the maximum density. 2 of those are allowed to be cabins, which is what we have proposed here with the 2 glass pyramids. There is a requirement that if the property is not accessed on a county maintained road, that a waiver be approved and that the applicant provides an improvement plan for the roads leading from a county maintained road, or in this case, ADOT maintained with Highway 64 to the subject property. And the applicant hasn't completed that yet, but it is a condition that is recommended here. It's something that's required by the ordinance. They will create that plan, and they have justified their waiver that was attached to the staff report, and they will have a maintenance plan that will be approved, and they will do the maintenance and improvement prior to use of the property. Another requirement is that there be a 50-foot compatibility setback from adjacent residentially zoned parcels. So that's everything surrounding this parcel, and the applicant has shown that. So they are conforming there as well. Another thing that's required is a neighborhood compatibility plan. So the applicant has included a plan with quiet hours, the landscaping that they're showing. They're stating that that's something that helps with the compatibility, and they will have minimal lighting. So they feel that that is what will make it compatible with adjacent residential properties. It's also a requirement that campgrounds in the general zone be within a fire district or subscribe to a district, and with that, or with a department. And with that fire department, they have to create a FireWise and emergency response plan. So the applicant is currently working with High Country Fire. They're down in the Red Lake area, not too far. They've already started working with High Country Fire on creating that sort of plan, and it will be required to be finished prior to occupancy of the property. So a few slides ago, we saw the site plan, and there was some landscaping planned. The applicant has planned 18 trees and 48 shrubs kind of clustered near the northern portion of the property, near the communal areas and some of the northernmost tents. This is a property that's very visible from 360 degrees around from properties that are developed with single family uses. So staff is recommending that there be additional vegetation and some fencing. So staff's recommendation, and you'll see in the conditions, is that the entire property have solid 6-foot fencing around it, and that there be 4 additional plant units in addition to what was shown on their landscaping plan around the property to aid in kind of breaking up and possibly buffering the use from neighboring properties. I have on here on the screen, this is a table from the zoning ordinance. And I think the commissioners are aware that it's a number of trees and shrubs that are required for each plant unit. So 4 additional of those should be a fairly substantial amount of new vegetation that will help in buffering. As far as citizen participation, the applicant notified property owners within 0.75 of a mile of the subject property of their request and went over in detail that the request that they were going to apply for, or that they have applied for, in a virtual meeting that took place on December 15th, 2020. And 5 neighboring property owners attended the meeting. 3 neighboring property owners also sent letters to the applicant that they included in their citizen participation plan report. That was attached to the staff reports for you to view as well. And you saw in that report that concerns expressed included physical separation of property from neighboring properties with a fence, ATV usage, noise, dust, traffic, lighting, the typical sorts of concerns for this sort of use that we've seen before. The applicant's plan and the additional conditions by staff staff finds those as mitigating the issues that are raised. I wanted to go through with the commission, especially just because this property is surrounded by developed single family uses. The purpose statement of the campground's use, to keep that in mind as we go through with the approval process. It is one of the findings of fact that need to be made for approval of a conditional use permit, that the use is consistent with the purpose of the zone and the zoning ordinance. So I have up here the statement. It is to permit recreational camping areas with short-term or seasonal occupancy to support tourism, provide for enjoyment of the county's vast natural resources, and complement the surrounding national parks, national forest, and national monuments, while ensuring compatibility with neighboring single-family residential areas, and to protect scenic view sheds. And it goes on to explain our environmentally sensitive features, wildlife habitat, that we also want to make the campgrounds compatible with that. So the most important part to staff for this case is ensuring compatibility with the single-family residential uses. And that's why staff is recommending the additional fencing and landscaping. And also just to go through, because we haven't seen with all of our different campgrounds so far, and it's a relatively new use, as you know, that having cabins, only having 2 of them is important because it ensures that the project can sort of revert back to a single family use if the campground use is abandoned. So on this slide, I discussed before that this request is not on a county maintained road, and here are the findings of fact that the commission needs to make to approve the use not being on a county maintained road. And those are that the granting of the waiver will not diminish the ability for emergency service providers to access the property and carry out their services. B, the granting of the waiver will not put an undue maintenance burden or impact on others that legally use the access. C, that granting of the waiver is consistent with applicable engineering standards. D, that the granting of the waiver will not have a negative impact on neighboring properties. And so staff believes that staff's finding that the waiver can be approved based on the conditions of having the improvement and maintenance plan. So that's conditioned there in the staff report. The findings for the general use, the conditional use permit, there are 4 of them, as you know, and all 4 need to be found in order to approve the case. One is that the proposed location of the conditional use is in accordance with the objectives of this ordinance and the purpose of the zone in which the site is located. 2 is that the proposed location of the conditional use and the conditions under which it would be operated or maintained will not be detrimental to public health, safety, or welfare. 3 is that the proposed conditional use will comply with each of the applicable provisions of the ordinance except for approved variances. So in this case, it is the approved waiver for the county maintained road standard. And 4, that the proposed conditional use is consistent and conforms to the goals, objectives, and policies of the comprehensive plan. In the staff report, and I apologize, I didn't put it in the presentation here, but I've gone through a number of tourism type goals where this use is consistent with the comprehensive plan in that way. So staff is able to make these findings with the mitigation and health safety conditions that are recommended in the staff report. So with that, if the commission is able to make the findings, staff recommends approval of the county maintained road waiver and approval of the conditional use permit with the proposed conditions. I'm happy to take any questions from the commission at this time.
Zach, this is Commissioner Best. Thank you for that. I've got a couple of questions. You're recommending a 6-foot fence all the way around the property, which is a lot of fence. And I'm a little unsure about the landscaping outside of the fence. Do they have a water source to irrigate? And how many plant units go down each side of, I think each side is about 660 feet. So is there going to be a significant amount of planting, or just what would that look like?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Best, so that is a significant amount of planting, and the idea was the purpose of it was to put 1 plant unit on each side. It might not say that specifically in the condition, but that was sort of the intent of it. And it is, the applicant will need to haul water to the site. So water could possibly be an issue with it, but the idea is to use plants that are drought tolerant and native type plant species, which would be required in a landscaping plan. Sort of after this approval, staff would go through it, and hopefully it wouldn't need a whole lot of water to establish, but once it's established, you might know that plant material out there is able to survive without a whole lot of water after it's established.
Okay, yeah, that will be tough to keep that irrigated. Just a comment, in previous years, we have brought up asphalt millings, and I haven't heard the phrase asphalt millings in the last few years. They are exactly that. They're old asphalt that's been crushed. And we've suggested them from time to time as just in our comments, because they make a pretty good road surface that deals with dust effectively. So I would just throw that out there in your discussion with the applicant. And I have quite a list of potential additions to the conditions based on the last campground that we did, which was just a few weeks ago, really. But we can save that for later. That's all I have for now. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Schwartz, this is Chair Ontiveros, and going to condition number 7, where it talks about the applicant shall install a solid fence or wall. It's going to go all the way around the entire property, right?
Yes, Madam Chair, that is the intent.
Okay, and do we have an idea of what that wall or fence will be constructed of?
Madam Chair, we don't have a final plan of what it would be, and the idea would be that it's just something aesthetic, and it would be approved by staff after the hearing and before any sorts of other permits be pulled on the property.
Okay, and it would be 6 feet in height?
That's what staff is recommending.
Okay, and how tall is the proposed pyramid cabin?
Madam Chair, that's a pretty good question. It's not something that I think was addressed in the submittals. Definitely, if we're looking at them as being cabins, it's something that would need to meet the typical standards of a residence in the zone, which is 35 feet is the max height. The applicant might be able to give you more data on exactly what they're looking at.
Okay, thank you. That's all the questions that I have. I'm looking and I am not seeing, no, Commissioner Best is unmuted.
One more question. Have you had any discussion about, I think you mentioned color of the tinted glass. Also, are there any reflection issues when you have a number of these pyramids all together? Is there a possibility that there could be a glare issue to the neighbors?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Best, so with the glare issue, that's something where the applicant has said that they've looked into the issue quite a bit, and they've said that the film that they're proposing would pretty severely reduce glare. So you might ask them if they have more details on that. And it is something where staff has recommended in one of these conditions here, I can find it, I'm sure, is that the film be an earth tone color.
I did see that. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and actually, Mr. Schwartz, that's condition number 2, because I was wondering about that as well. Okay, I am not seeing any other commissioners unmuted. So I am going to go ahead and ask if the representative or, if the applicant or if the applicant's representative is available to address the commission this evening.
Hi, this is Jenny from, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. And would you please state your name and address for the record? And let me also ask this question of you prior to your presentation. But have you received the staff report? Have you read it? And do you agree with the conditions that it contains?
Yes, I do agree with the conditions that they've laid out for us.
Okay. Okay, and why don't you go ahead and state your name and address the commission on this case?
Okay, sure. My name is Jenny Pijanu. Address is 1807 East 31st Street, Williams, Arizona, 86046. And I'm one of the property owners. And I just wanted to quickly address one of your questions regarding the tinted glass and the glare. So we have certainly thought about those concerns as well. And we have actually done some of our own research and spoke to a couple of glass manufacturers that specialize in new glass technologies. And there is one in particular called One Switch. That's where we pretty much got our inspiration from. And there is now glass technology out there that, you know, pretty much can deliver 0% glare. And I think in particular in commercial use, I don't know if you've ever been inside of a Dreamliner 787, but that's what they use as well.
Okay, thank you. Do you have any other comments that you would like to address with the commission this evening?
No, I think the planners covered a lot of the things pretty well already. So unless there was anything else specific that, you know, any of you have questions on that haven't been answered yet, I'm more than happy to address those.
Okay, do any of the commissioners have any questions for the applicant at this time?
Yeah, this is
Commissioner
Commissioner Best.
Hey there.
Am I good to go? Well, thank you for being here. One item that I wanted to point out to you is the challenge that we have with landscaping and trying to keep out non-native invasive weeds. And if you're from Williams, you may know as much about this as I do. But just looking at the map, it's going to be very challenging to lay out this property and have any native plants left. Not to say it can't be done, but if a contractor is just turned loose out there, they're pretty much going to run all over their property and scrape most of it up. And once you do that, since you don't have water on the site, you've really got a challenge because the disturbed soil is something that's going to attract native weeds before it attracts, I'm sorry, non-native weeds before native plants can get reestablished. And so I would just comment, and I have a proposed addition to the conditions, but I would just comment that it's really going to take some thought between you and contractors and landscapers to try to keep the little bit of vegetation that you have there. And,
right.
There's
No,
not much there.
And,
you know, in the drought we're in, even established plants are having a really hard time reestablishing native plants with very little water is probably not going to happen. So it's going to take a lot of stakes and flagging tape delineating where contractors can go and where they can't go. And so I would just hope that you're sensitive to that, and you have, you know, you've kind of touched that base, that value in your presentation. And since you're a local person, that's heartening because other people might not get it. But you could easily turn that site into a real desert. And
gotcha. No, and we certainly have been cognizant of this. We have talked with our engineer about this particular issue, and he has so far proposed developing some sort of gray water system. But I think Ian can speak to that a little bit better than I can as far as the technicalities go.
Thank you very much.
Okay, do any of the other commissioners have any other questions for the applicant at this time? Okay, seeing none, I am going to ask if there is anyone in the public who wishes to address the commission on this case this evening. Okay, all right. I see a Melinda Gantner. Your hand is raised. Melinda, if you would like to go ahead and address the commission, state your name and address for the record, and then please limit your comments to 3 minutes or less, and go ahead.
Yes, my name is Melinda Gantner. My address is 6671 Lasso Loop in Williams. The comments that I have is number one, the fire hazards, especially during the droughts we have. They did state that they are working with High Country Fire and Rescue, but High Country Fire and Rescue is almost 30 minutes away in normal travel time, and during the season could also take a lot longer. So are they going to have trained staff that will be able to respond to a fire? My second comment would be, they've identified themselves as living on Dirty Bird, yet their application states that they are in Beverly Hills. So are they going to be living on the property? And my third comment is, what are they going to do to rectify the illegal campground that they are currently running on South Rim Ranch?
Okay, thank you. Does that conclude your comments, Ms. Gantner?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other, is there any other public that wishes to address the commission this evening? If so, please raise your hand and or unmute so that I can see you and call on you. Okay, I am not seeing anyone. Mr. McNeely, I'm going to reach out to you because I don't want to miss anyone. Are you seeing anyone that I'm not?
So, Madam Chair, this is Jess. I'm looking through the participants. I am not seeing anyone
Yes,
raising.
Mark and Serena Holt.
Oh, yes. Okay. Yes, Mark and Serena Holt. If you would like to address the commission, please state your name and address, and then go ahead, and you've got 3 minutes.
Thank you. My remark, my name is Mark Holt. Address is 5769 North Woodland View Road. We're mainly sitting on this for the next campground that you're going to talk about, but it was brought up that they were working with High Country. We just had a fire out here about a little over 2 years ago, called the Indian Meadows Fire. It was started right next to the campground that is being proposed on the next one. Anyway, it ended up wiping out structures. We lost 200 trees to it on my last 12 acres of two 20-acre pieces I have. But I talked to Robert, I think his last name is Trotter, the fire chief from High Country, and that I talked to him on Monday at about 3:20, 3:30, right around there. And he informed me, because I was asking him about, all these people were saying that they were going to use High Country. And he informed me that High Country is not covering any fire or campground out in the Woodland Ranch area, period. That they were only going to do one. There's no Firewise programs that they're approving. They have one campground that's right inside of Valley, across from the Chevron station in that area. We don't have that fire department that people are counting on. And like was said previously, it's 28 plus miles away, the volunteer fire department. So they have to wait for people to come to the engine and then come out. We lost a lot of property. We were in a third stage no burn, and somebody that lived right next to where that new campground is going to go decided they were going to do a barrel fire, and went in the house, came back out, and it was gone. It not only did it raise our insurances because they hit us with that, because we had a fire there. They had nothing to do with us. They're also going after that gentleman. The sheriff's department is, and it's just affecting all of us that live there. And we bought that place to have a retirement home. Basically, the bottom line is, Mr. Trotter said they are not doing a firewise with anybody in that area, period. Thank you very much. I hope I didn't take too much time. Is there any comment on that, or? Hello?
Madam Chair, I think you're on mute.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Schwartz. I was on mute. Okay, Mr. Holt, if you could go ahead and mute, and then I see a Tim Owens who has his hand raised. Mr. Owens, would you like to address the commission tonight? State your name and address, and then you've got 3 minutes. So Mr. Owens, unmute and then address the commission.
Can you hear us now?
Yes, we sure can. Yep, state your name and address and then go ahead and address us.
Hi, my name is Tim Owens. I'm at 4422 North Altavia Road. And so we're adjacent to the property. And I'm curious because I know there was a glamping site wander camp recently approved, and they had
there was no
taken care of the
mention of
fire.
any fire problems on that campsite, and that one is northeast of the new campground that's right next to our property. So I'm kind of concerned about why is there a fire problem question now, and the other one got approved. Because if this campground abides by the county fire bans, then there should be no problem. Because if I see in the concept drawing, there's not going to be 20 fire pits. There's only going to be a few. So I'm really in support of this project. We actually share property line with the campground on Altavia. So I'm just saying, I don't really think there's going to be a fire problem, no more than any other residential development, as a single family.
That was Signe Thompson, my wife. She's on the same property, by the way.
Okay.
So my question is, what are we all doing about fires? I mean, even though there's going to be 10 or 12 tents and or pyramids, if there's only a few fire pits, it's no more, no less than anybody else that lives on 10 or 20 acres has. Am I making sense on that fire problem?
Yes, and you are in your 3 minutes, so you can, share your points of view and concern, definitely.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So that's my thing. I'm in support of the project. I do have a question about the 6-foot fence. Is that height really necessary? It obstructs the views, the 360 views from the campground and also our back 10 acres that we have there. Those are my only 2 concerns. But other than that, I just want to say we're in support of the project.
In support of it.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to ask if there is anybody else, and if you could, Mr. Owens, if you could go ahead and mute again, and I'm going to see, is there anybody else in the public who wishes to address the commission on this case? And Mr. McNeely, are you seeing anyone? I see that the applicant has their hand raised, but I'm looking for public participants.
So, Madam Chair, I'm only seeing the applicant's hand raised. I'm not seeing any other hands raised.
Okay. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and close it to the public. And I'm going to go ahead and before I open it up, Mr. Schwartz, to commission discussion. I would just like to ask you if you have confirmed, I'm specifically looking at condition number 4. Have you confirmed that the applicant can become or will become a subscriber to the High Country Fire Department? Have you talked to the fire chief?
Right, thank you, Madam Chair. I've talked to the fire chief before, but not on this particular issue. And the applicant in their narrative stated that they've been discussing a FireWise plan with High Country. It's something that's in the conditions, so unless that were modified, the applicant is required to finalize that plan, get it approved by the fire chief and by our department prior to conducting the use at all. So if they're not able to, then they wouldn't be able to conduct the use. My understanding is that some of the other campgrounds that we've worked with in that area have, and in fact, some that I've worked on actually have gotten approved plans from Chief Trotter at High Country. So I don't think it will be problematic, but it is a requirement of the conditions as recommended. And so they would have to do that if the commission plans to stick with the recommended conditions there in order to conduct the use.
So, Madam Chair and Zach, this is Jess. I just want to make one addition, and thanks, Zach, for that. But in addition to the conditions as proposed in the staff report, the zoning ordinance has a base requirement that all campgrounds maintain a valid service agreement with a recognized fire safety and emergency services organization. So regardless of conditions, and the commission doesn't even have the authority to waive that requirement. It's a base requirement of the zoning ordinance for a campground under a CUP in the G zone to be operating. It's a base requirement of the zoning ordinance that they have fire and emergency services, and they maintain those fire and emergency services. If at any point in time those fire and emergency services cease to be serving the campground would have to shut. They would be in violation of the zoning ordinance.
Okay, thank you, Mr. McNeely, and thank you, Mr. Schwartz, for that clarification. That's very helpful information. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and open it up to commission discussion. And Commissioner Ruggles, why don't we go ahead and start with you?
Okay. First things first, I would like to commend Mr. Schwartz on his crafting of the lighting condition, very simply for the fact that without the requirement that outdoor lighting shall meet the requirements for single family residences in accordance with section 4.3 of the zoning ordinance, that makes it unnecessary to change anything else and update it to some of the other requirements that we have recently instituted. It will work quite well the way it is written. Thank you very much for that, Zach. Second thing, in terms of a fire pit and burn policies, I believe that when we go to fire restrictions, which is typical during our fire season, late spring, early summer, that would also apply to a fire pit in this campground area. And I would appreciate it if staff would correct me on that, but I do believe it will apply to all property within the county.
So, Madam Chair and Commissioner Ruggles, you are absolutely correct. Yeah, when there's a fire ban, it includes private property.
Right, and I believe that should go quite a ways in addressing some of the issues the next door neighbors had. We spoke quite eloquently about their support for this, but with some consideration about fire on the property. Otherwise, this, I think, I can make the findings without any problem. I don't have any other suggestions for changes in the conditions. The fencing, kind of a position of we're in trouble if we do, we're in trouble if we don't. So I think other people have asked to have fencing, solid fencing. I think it'll work here, considering the size of the adjacent properties. So other than that, I can go along with the rest of this as the conditions outlay how to proceed with this project.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Ruggles. One of the questions I'm going to pose to the commissioners as we're going through this, and actually, Commissioner Ruggles, I'm going to ask you this as well. When Mr. Schwartz was giving the staff presentation this evening, he talked about compatibility with the neighborhood. What are your thoughts on the compatibility of glass pyramids?
Okay, I'm looking at this, I guess, from the standpoint of an engineer here. I know we looked at the glass and reflectivity and transmissibility issues with Grace Community Church when that came before us. I looked at what was out there and what was available in terms, specifically in terms of transmissibility at the time. It was very apparent that the technology was developing quite rapidly. And this is something a little bit new since I looked at this, but I think the applicants or the property owner actually has addressed this fairly thoroughly. As long as the glass that they are going to use limits reflectivity, which is what creates the glare, then I think that 2 pyramids located where they are should not pose a problem. And if it does, of course, it's going to change as the arc of the sun changes throughout the day. So the effect may be rather limited if there is some reflectivity that could potentially pose a problem. However, I think this is an expensive solution. The glass to do this is not cheap. So I think they're attempting to solve the problem here. And I think it could be quite effective. I can't say how effective because I haven't looked at the type of glass they are proposing. Nevertheless, I think it's a pretty good plan.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Ruggles. That's helpful for me. Okay, Commissioner Burton.
Yeah, I mean, I think it sounds like a pretty good plan, and I think any concerns I have been addressed, and I am in agreement with Commissioner Ruggles that given that it's only two quote cabins or pyramids, if they're using that special glass, I don't see it as being a huge issue. But and as far as compatibility with the neighborhood, as far as appearance, if we're going through with them putting up a fence, it's going to be pretty limited visibility for people outside looking in, except for maybe the peaks up over the fence. But I mean, the whole region has had some very eclectic designs, let's put it that way. So I don't think it'd be outside of the realm of appropriateness. So that's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Burton. Commissioner Best.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think in general this is good. And I can make the findings. The fence is a challenge. I hope we don't end up with a chain link fence with aluminum slats. I hope we end up with a wood fence. I hope that the landscaping on the outside of the wood fence kind of breaks it up a little bit. It is probably something that we need, but at the same time, it is just a great big long fence from any direction you're looking. So it's got a positive and a negative. I'm going to suggest some conditions here you know, we're doing so many of these and we're learning as we go along, and basically I'm looking at the conditions we put on the last one of these, Wander Camp, and making sure that we get everything we learned into this. So on condition number 3, after 42,000 pound public safety vehicle period, I would put in a dust mitigation plan shall be approved by staff. And then on condition number 4, I would add the facility shall be staffed at all time by personnel trained and equipped to extinguish fires as approved by the fire chief. And I believe in one of these campgrounds, we required a tank on an ATV. If that's what the fire chief requires, I think that'd be a good idea, but I would leave that up to him or her. And then on condition number 6, I would add the property shall be, I'm sorry, let's see. That's already covered. And then I would add a condition, I would change condition number 14 to read applicant shall provide all guests with leave no trace educational materials. See the Center for Outdoor Ethics. That's the nonprofit organization that cheaply provides those that information. I would have a new condition number 15. There shall be no motorized vehicle rentals except for bicycles, and no OHVs will be operated on the property. And this is in conjunction with what the applicant has said in their analysis. And then number 16 would be the old number 14.
Or the old number 15.
Yeah, we still have the same 2 last ones. And then let's go back to number 6. I missed something there. That's on the landscaping. Added to the end of condition 6 would be the applicant shall develop a plan to minimize native soil and plant disturbance during construction and operation of the facility. And that goes to what I talked about with the applicant, and she seemed to be sensitive to that. That's all I have, and I think we're learning more as we do these, and this seems to be a pretty well-designed facility. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Best. While I see staff making the modifications, even as we're speaking, and can you go back, whoever's doing it, be it Mr. Schwartz or Mr. McNeely? We have the one in number 3. I just want I want the entire commission to see these. Okay, and Commissioner Best, would you please like look at these really carefully with me and make sure that they are saying what you just put out? So number 3, is that correct?
That looks good.
Okay, let's go to number 4 right now. Let's fill in the blanks there. Commissioner Best, if you could reread that condition so it can be written, so we can see it now.
Let's see, that is the facility shall be staffed at all times by personnel trained and equipped to extinguish fires as approved by the fire chief.
I'm sorry, Scott. This is Zach with Schwartz with planning staff. I've started writing it, and I just want to make sure I get it right. The facility shall be staffed at all times by personnel. Is that something like that? Trained and equipped
to extinguish fires as approved by the fire chief.
Thank you.
Okay, and then number 6, that looks like what you had, Commissioner Best, correct?
Number 6.
Number 6.
I said the applicant shall develop a plan to minimize native soil and plant disturbance during construction and operation of the facility. So we want a good system of paths too, so that people don't just run over all the what little is there.
Okay, okay, we've got number 6, and then I believe that you put one in prior to number 15.
Yeah, I just changed, I put a new one in. This is a new 14. And it says, the applicant shall provide all guests with leave no trace educational materials. Parentheses, see the Center for Outdoor Ethics. Parentheses.
Okay, hold on just a minute. Zach is doing good. But let's give him a minute to catch up here.
I'm sorry, are you here? Okay, I'm unmuted. Sorry,
Okay.
Commissioner Best, I have the applicant shall provide all guests with leave no trace materials. See, what's the group?
Leave no trace educational materials. See the Center for Outdoor Ethics. And these are all just conditions that are in the notes from last month. I'm just quoting them directly. So.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you.
And then number 15 becomes there shall be no motorized vehicle rentals except for bicycles, and no OHVs will be operated on the property. And then
Did you say something about being leased? Because I know this came up with Happy Jack about being operated or leased on the property, rented on the property.
we can throw that in there.
I believe so. Commissioner Best and Zach, you didn't catch it. I think 15 was there shall be no motorized vehicle rentals except for bicycles.
There we go. Okay.
And I think that's the last one. And I guess I'd like to comment to the applicant because we have done, I believe, 6 or 7 campgrounds in the last 6 or 8 months. One thing that we have learned is about razors and other types of OHVs, which are sort of a new generation. They're not your little putt around at 20 miles an hour, the little 4-wheelers. These are things that can tear around at 50 miles an hour. And I just want the applicant to be aware of the issue that they have been tearing up neighborhoods around other campgrounds. And I'm not quite sure that I don't know that we could write something so perfectly that somebody couldn't show up either towing an OHV and take it off the property where you don't have jurisdiction. Just be aware of this issue. You're seeing more and more of these things being towed around, and they really have an impact on the neighbors. So when you come back in 5 years, we hope all the neighbors say, this was a wonderful experience, and they don't say as we've heard many times in the last 6 months, this place attracts these razors, and they are a nightmare for the neighborhood because they're tearing around, scaring small children and raising clouds of dust. So that's just some information from our recent history. Thank you very much. I think this is a nice project.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Best. Commissioner Williams.
I can make the findings for this. I'm a little on the fence about the fence, but it can go. There's good things about it and, potentially not great things about it. But, and I do think that the pyramids, I think they fit in as well as RVs and stuff that people are living in out there. So variety is the spice of life, as they say. So I think it'll be good.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Williams. Commissioner Walters.
I can make the findings on this. I'd like to go back to the list of conditions. I think that we made a little mistake on there when we were
Okay,
making some of the changes.
Okay,
If we go to the one with the OHVs, and in one area, we say that we want to have the firefighting ability by using a small quad or OHV, and then we say no OHV shall be operated on the property. I think we need to modify that. So Sot, I'm looking to you. You're the one that
Okay.
put this in here.
There shall be no motorized vehicle except for comma,
Okay,
with the exception of firefighting equipment.
Okay.
That's a good catch.
And possibly this Chair Ontiveros, this is Jess. And I'm not sure if the applicant has thought through operation plans. It's not uncommon for some kind of little John Deere or something to be used in an operation like this, just for logistics in running the place. If you go out to the Nordic Center on Forest Service land, which is a similar operation with yurts, you've got employees there for the Nordic Center yurt rental operation, carrying firewood out to the yurts or doing things like that with an ATV.
Why don't we say after equipment, why don't we say or maintenance vehicles? Good catch.
yeah,
That ought to do it.
yeah, I agree. I think that's good. Okay, thank you, Commissioner Walters. And Commissioner Walters, did you have anything else?
No, ma'am.
Okay, Commissioner Clifford?
I can make the findings to approve this, and the glass domes are no different than a cabin a big cabin that somebody can build out there with two sides that have floor to roof glass on them. So I don't think there's going to be a problem with them.
Okay, thank you. And this is Chair Ontiveros, and I concur with the comments of my fellow commissioners. And the one, I'm just going to have to go back to what Commissioner Ruggles said on the fence, because I was kind of struggling with this too. But it's an issue if we do, and it's an issue if we don't. And I think that to err on the side of caution, if you will, would be to go ahead and do it. It's up to staff to approve this, and they have always done an excellent job of keeping things looking good in the county. So with that, I can also make the findings, and we will go ahead. I'll go ahead and accept a motion in a second now, please.
Madam Chair, I move that we pass approve CUP 21002 with the conditions as amended.
I would like to second that.
Okay, thank you. I've got a motion by Commissioner Best and a second by Commissioner Ruggles for approval of CUP 21-002. All of those in favor, please say aye. Commissioner Ruggles?
Aye.
Commissioner Burton?
Aye.
Commissioner Best?
Aye.
Commissioner Williams?
Aye.
Commissioner Walters?
Aye.
Commissioner Clifford?
Aye.
And this is Chair Ontiveros, and I also vote aye. So CUP 21-002 is approved unanimously. And the fourth item on the agenda is call to the public for items not on the agenda. Is there anyone who wishes to address the commission this evening for items not on the agenda? Okay, and I am not seeing any. So my clock shows 6:35 p.m. and the meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Thank you, Madam Chair. See you all next month.
Thanks. Good.
Bye.
Thanks. Good night, everyone.
Hey, Jess, are you still there?
I was pretending I was frozen for a second, but yeah, I'm still here. I'm watching for this cat. I'm telling you, we got a loose cat in the building. Can you bring one of your dogs over?
Could you hear my dogs
Oh
barking?
yeah. Oh yeah, I can always hear your dogs.
Sorry about that.
What's
Hey,
up? What
I'm
would you do,
gonna-
Sat?
A couple